Hello, everybody. I hope you've had an amazing time at our very first virtual conference, Digital Fundraising Day. For the last webinar of the day, we're joined by Product Lead Caroline Rennie from Comic Relief. We've set up this session a little differently than usual. First of all, you can see us, so we'll give you a bit of a wave, trying something different there. And second of all, we've set it up as more of a Q&A. So Caroline and I are going to have a little chat, a little interview style chat, and then we want to spend the bulk of the time answering your questions. So hit the Q&A button below and get them posted as quickly as possible so we can get through them. So we can try and get through them all. As always, if we don't manage to do that, we will be having Caroline stick around for an extra 30 minutes afterwards to answer some of your questions on our Facebook group, the Charity Digital Events. I'm sure we've plugged that enough today, so you're well aware of it. But if you haven't signed up to it yet, get yourselves over there. Also, since it's the last webinar of the day, I would like to plug our conference. We are launching our 2020 Be More Digital conference that will be held at the London Olympia on March 5th. We kind of sat down and thought what we could, how could we build on the successful one we ran last year. And, there's a lot of talk about digital transformation, and a lot of our conversations today have been around digital transformation. And the more we kind of drill down into it, and, transformation, it's a big, scary word. In fact, how we see it is we want charities to just be that little more digital. So if you're interested in joining that, I would head over to www.charitydigital.org.uk/BeMoreDigital2020 to learn a little bit more. You can sign up there. If you do so today, you'll be able to get a code that gets you a discount on your ticket as well. Anyways, kind of back to the topic at hand. That's what we're all here for, right? Welcome, Caroline. Yes. Why don't you kick off by telling us sort of a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what you do with Comic Relief?
Cool. Yeah, so I'm Caroline. I've been at Comic Relief for about 3 years now. I work in the Digital and Innovation Directorate, which is almost as pretentious as it sounds. We're in charge of all of our consumer-facing technical products. So that's our website, donation platforms, but then also the sort of integrations with data for third-party platforms like Just Giving or Givergy for auctions, SMS donations, and all that sort of thing. So basically, lots of things around fundraising, but slightly more the technical side of it.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of highlights upon that digital fundraising kind of means something totally different for everybody, doesn't it? Depending on what your role is within an organization. And that's kind of been a big takeaway for me from today, and a lot of the content that we've been running is kind of had that focus on, as well as the social media and the general marketing that we all need to do as fundraisers. There's also another side to it as well, and there's, be it the sort of digital product side of it, be it the digital strategy and the culture side of it as well. And, as Trillian mentioned, thinking about your people, and then it's going as far back to like cats protection, and Matt from Platypus talked about, about getting the basics right as well. It's kind of, essentially there's a lot of different things, and, we even alluded to that in our ebook. I don't know if everybody's read it yet, but that even brings in the new financial models that charities can make the most of. Comic Relief is clearly well established in terms of campaigning. We've obviously got Red Nose Day, Sport Relief, among many others. But could you share with us some of the other roles that digital is playing in driving Comic Relief's fundraising?
Sure. So the main thing which our sort of department has done historically, so over the past maybe 6 years or so, is be that support function for things like our night of television. And that's one of our biggest possible fundraising moments from the general public. And it's one which has sort of our biggest technical challenges as well, as potentially some of the other people viewing maybe do stuff on live broadcast. But one of the biggest, most stressful things, as you've probably experiencing today, is you have no idea how many people are going to turn up and respond to the content you're putting out there. And you need to make sure your systems can handle massive spikes. But then, how do you cater for massive spikes without spending too much money and overscaling? So that's really been one of the biggest things that we do in terms of making sure we've got the right technical infrastructure to make sure that we can handle, if we have a night of TV, we're not going to have our website crash. We're not going to have our donation platform crashed, and we need to make sure that those systems are all up. But sort of, as you alluded to on the sort of culture side, we're also trying to embed a slightly more agile culture, which is one in which we can make, test, learn, and trying to do that throughout the organization, not just within digital. So how can we embed making something, testing it quickly with users, and then iterating on it with our filming team and broadcast team. So we're trying to introduce that new culture within our organization.
Very cool. I'd love to say we were on the same scale as you and have those same level of worries, but we'll not quite be getting the millions of people through the door yet. But here's hoping. So out of all that, I mean, there's surely a lot of the things you've been doing behind the scenes. What have been some of the biggest game changers that you've seen, really drive digital fundraising, and what's helped you be more impactful?
So I guess the biggest thing for us is actually following our strategy, which is very much built around when to build something and when to buy something. There's sort of been a historic tendency at Comic Relief that if you build it, they will come, which is true sometimes. But it's often that you will invest quite a lot of time and effort into something which is already a commodity technology. So probably our biggest example of that would be, we used to build our own giving pages. So you can sign up, create a fundraising page, people could pay onto it. There's actually so many complex technical things within those functionalities, which we were trying to replicate in-house. On the basis of being able to have more control over the data that we're going to get, having full ownership of the platform. But within the last sort of couple of years, Just Giving has become one of those sort of market-leading, absolute tearaway from all of their competitors, that we've just sort of bit the bullet and we're like, do you know what? We need to retire this platform, which part of that is accepting when you've had sunk investment, and you can look back and go, well, we've invested a lot of time and effort in this, so should we keep it? And for us, we just went, well, in order to keep it, we need to continue that amount of effort. So switching over to the commodity tech of Just Giving has been one of probably the biggest sort of, well, it's not the one which I feel like is like here's a cool product that I made, but I think it's a cool decision that we facilitated, and that mindset change of, are we able to capture, is the data quality we're getting from our own platform that much more valuable than what we'll get from what is the end user's sort of default choice for this product? So Just Giving is what people, the way you describe your product is, it's our own version of Just Giving. Something's gone wrong and you need to just sort of bite the bullet and say, we should just use that. Yeah. And so that sort of making that decision of going with a well-known commodity, which is trusted by users, which actually, when you look at the bottom line costs, is significantly cheaper than building your own. That's been a real big game changer for us.
Yeah, great. I mean, all great examples of how charities can look at things in a little bit more of a digital way to impact their fundraising. I mean, even for smaller charities, who they can look at things not only as a cost but an opportunity cost for them. I know we were kind of chatting before about, it's not necessarily, it's a slightly different equation for you where it's build versus buy, but it's about weighing up the right cost in terms of what tech should I buy. Yeah. So I think there's very useful takeaways there. I mean, there's a lot we put forward that all small charities need. Come away from this sort of even the filing systems to a digital CRM system, all like that. There's a lot going on. So
I was going to say, I should acknowledge that Comic Relief is in a really lucky position that we do have quite a sizable digital innovation team. So there's about 30 of us in total, which is minuscule in compared to cancer research, but I appreciate it's massive in compared to a ton of charities. But the mentality around if you're going out, so rather than saying build versus buy, it's not just whether you're building internally, it's what are you going to an agency to build for you, and is there a software as a service solution that you could be using instead of building something bespoke. That's really what we mean when we talk about build versus buy.
Yeah, great. So in terms of if sort of forecasting and looking forward, from a digital fundraising and digital product and fundraising sort of angle, what does the future look like? Is there anything sort of in your pipeline at the minute that's a bit of a wow factor?
I'm not sure if it's like a proper wow factor in that I'm sure there's tons of people doing much cooler stuff than us. But what we're really trying to work on at the moment within our team is how we can really join up the dots within trust and transparency. And trust is now sort of one of the biggest value that we can add through digital. And we're doing a lot of work of how we can connect our grants data, which is where the money ends up, with like sort of really integrating that into our donation journey. And again, because we're lucky enough to be able to build things ourselves, what we're able to do is integrate, like we call them money buys, but when we've got a project saying here's what that £10 can do, being able to integrate that into a donation journey, so that if you're in South Shields, you might see a money buy for a project near you when you come on our platform, and just trying to really connect end users, as in the donors, with our end service users who are the beneficiaries of the money they're going to give, and really trying to work on how you can make that a clear and transparent journey when, as probably everyone knows, there are a million steps between that £10 hitting public relief bank account and then going into that end service users sort of world. So
no, I think that's a great point. And I hope that South Shields analogy was for my dulcet tones and benefit. So thank you very much.
It was an absolute pun. I was like, if he's from Sunderland, he's going to hate this.
I'm from Newcastle. But thanks for that. So that kind of wraps up our sort of interview style Q&A there. We want to hand the floor over to all of you, the audience now. So get your questions rolling in. We'll have a few in already. If you want to add a question, there's a Q&A button center left on the screen. Hit that, add a question, and we'll make sure it gets answered. So let's start at the very beginning. It's often the best place to start. From Mandy, being such a large organization and having so many different funding streams and campaigns, how do you ensure you keep track of everything in a centralized way to ensure you're not repeating those doubling workloads?
Cool, great question. I would say we're definitely trying to improve those processes currently. So the way that all of our income from the general public comes in is all through our own sort of donation platforms, and we have a centralized database which we call the SSV, which stands for Single Supporter View. So that associates all income back to the originating activity. We are now in the process of trying to really improve how that data connects up to our finance systems. We have multiple different suppliers who will be contributing to those grand totals. So it's not a perfect system at all, but we sort of do the monthly reconciliations to make sure that we're getting clarity over what activity drove what revenue, and we generally don't have we don't have much restricted funding within our funding model, so that makes things easier. But what we're trying to do at the moment with the workstream I'm working on is to try and make it so that we could automate restricted funding if we wanted to. So that might have been a long and rambling way of saying we try and the repeating and doubling workload. I would say the way that we address most of, in fact, all of our data ingestion is all through APIs and converting data into our database automatically. So removing as much human interaction as possible. I know I sound a bit like Skynet when I say that, but destroy all the human interactions and we can really get a just world free from poverty.
Magic.
I don't know if Mandy can respond being like, no, that wasn't my question, but please do if it was wrong.
Thank you. So next up, question from Stuart. What in your experience is the best way for a small charity to maximise impact with minimal spend?
I think it's interesting. So I've never actually worked at a very small charity, but I do work quite a lot on our Tech for Good funding initiatives. And something which I would suggest would be, wherever you're thinking of trying something new with digital, look at software as a service as your first possible port of call. So by that I mean, if you're looking at a CRM and you're a small organization, look at Zendesk, not Salesforce. So looking at something which might be a £20 or £30 per month option rather than some big monolithical beast, which you then have to get completely wedded to. So that's sort of from a technical point of view. But to maximize impact with technology, yeah, that would be how I'd do that.
I think that's a really good you could spend a really good answer. Sorry. Yeah, we actually did a fundraising video today for part of this, where we sort of looked at all of the fundraising. Well, I say all of them. We looked at 10 fundraising platforms that our audience like to get into, like to use, and we kind of ranked them in a league table in terms of how much money you get from a £10 donation. So that I really resonated with that point in terms of it's things like that you know you can use to kind of weed out what is best for your charity, depending on what level or what part of the journey that you're on in that sense.
Yes, and as a sort of follow on, this might be a slightly controversial point of view. Where possible, look at solutions which aren't targeted at charities, because they often do fantastic not-for-profit discounts or completely free. Whereas anything which is a business entirely set up to target charities typically don't do great discounts. So that's top tip from Comic Relief.
There you go. You heard it here first. Well, thanks very much for that. So next question from Matthew. Does it make sense to use multiple digital fundraising outlets as a way of targeting a broader range of funders or highlighting different types of projects?
So we have a very diverse number of different platforms that we use. From a data ingestion point of view, we really wish there were fewer. And to be honest, I think tackling one, like getting within a big market share and really honing in on optimizing your largest possible area is probably a better use of time depending on the size of your organization, rather than trying to have your finger in too many pots. And by that I mean sort of certainly try out tons of different marketing, hit Facebook and Instagram marketing, but at the end of the day, when you have your conversion point of when they're going to give you the money, probably simplify that as much as you can rather than having 16 different ways in which somebody could possibly give you the money.
It's almost like doubling down on the thing that gives you the most, right? You know, that's a typical marketing employee. You know, if something's working, make it work better for you.
But yeah, and it's just think about with any new platform that you're thinking about trying out. So an example for us has been Facebook Donate. We've got our own donation platform. We've got our, you know, we use Just Giving. Adding Facebook Donate has been relatively successful for us, but when we compare it to what those sort of our traditional ones have been, it's not necessarily been the big payoff which everyone thought it might be. So for me, I think, you know, look at what value you think will be unlocked by, or how different is that new audience that you might be reaching, and really do that sort of market sizing piece.
Magic. Next question we have, how do you decide on a digital revenue model and how do you make it work as efficiently as possible?
Very good question from Anonymous. For us at the moment, we so much of our revenue is still tied into our traditional model, which is our night of TV, which is absolutely analog. But so we've got the way that we've maximized our efficiency within that has been by adopting serverless technology. So serverless is when, rather than having to pay for a suite of servers, you actually just sort of do a pay-as-you-go model, which we use AWS for this. They've been great. And what that's meant for us has been about a 93% saving in hosting costs, because rather than having to pay for 7 hours of being able to take 300 donations per second, which costs quite a lot, we just have a system which can take it when we need it, but we don't pay for it when we aren't using it. So it's been more around like looking at what our costs are of our traditional model and optimizing those costs, rather than I think that Comic Relief have not completely cracked digital fundraising, but we've cracked how to really impact on the sort of bottom line of how much money we're spending versus making. Hopefully that's been useful, but it's probably quite a niche problem that we have.
Well, that was great, thank you. Next question. Do you think having a well-known face fronting a campaign is important, or can a non-famous face do just as well?
That's yeah, that's a really interesting and marginally controversial comic relief point for us. So I've actually been doing some analysis recently on the financial impact of having celebrity, and whilst a lot of our so sort of we've got causation versus correlation in this field at the moment, because so much of our content is celebrity led that when we do stuff which isn't celebrity led, it does not perform as well. Right. But as a strategic direction for comic relief, as a sort of within our responsibility of being responsible for social perceptions and social change, we're doing a lot more of our storytelling is through our projects that we're funding, rather than being a celebrity fronting something and presenting it as comic relief. Having done that, we're trying to make sure that the voice of the end beneficiaries is being represented in a way that they're much more comfortable with. And that's really the direction of travel that we're going for. But if you ask me, like, actually, does celebrity have a large impact on revenue? It absolutely does. It's just a case of how you use that celebrity and how that celebrity is perceived to relate to that work. So a great example recently actually was Zoe Ball did a 5-day bike ride for us for last Sport Relief. And the theme that she was really highlighting during that time was male suicide, and obviously it was a personal story for her. So people really related to that authenticity of why is Zoe Ball caring about this. And so it is about authenticity a lot more now. You can't just chuck anyone in front of any issue. And similarly, like Ed Sheeran and homelessness worked really well for us this year. But yeah, it does have an impact, but we hope that we can have a much more like measured and responsible impact and use of how celebrities are perceived as being used.
Yeah, I think that's the key takeaway. I think donors are getting a lot smarter these days, aren't they? You need to give them, something that they can be more related to. And yeah, I think that's exactly the right point to make.
And yeah, and donors are just sort of typical people. So these people are now seeing celebrities front up absolutely anything. Yeah. So celebrity endorsement of products, you have to just see that charities are a product that a celebrity is endorsing, but for different reasons. So I think there's a real mind shift change that a celebrity is maybe not just doing something for social good, but doing stuff for their own brand. So that's where that authenticity piece really comes in.
Yeah, I guess it ties back into trust, what you were mentioning before as well. So we've managed to come full circle there, haven't we? Great, thank you very much. That was a great answer. So next up from Pauline, I think this is a great question as well. So how do we know which products are software as a service? Small charities are not always familiar with the language and the lingo.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So basically any product where you don't have to buy into a 2-year contract, or so where there's no expectation for you to have longer term contracting, is software as a service. So the example I used was Zendesk. That is a sort of ticketing software in which people can email you and you can email back and you can track their comms. So like one section of what a CRM might do. But if you want, you could go on their website right now, set up a trial. I now look like I'm sponsored by Zendesk. I'm not, they're just my top of my mind. So you could go on, set up a trial with them, start paying on a monthly basis, and then when you want to leave, you can leave. It also means that there's very minimal setup required from them. So the idea is that you can just set up an account and then be able to use that product, and that's where software is a service, rather than having to do, if you're buying Salesforce or CRM Dynamics from Microsoft or any of the other really big CRM providers, there'll be an expectation that you'll have an implementation partner who's going to take 3 months to configure the system to do exactly what you want. Most small charities do not necessarily have really complex needs in terms of customer relationship management. I know that Comic Relief doesn't. You just need to be able to track who's interacting with you, track who's giving you money, and track where you're spending the money. These don't necessarily all have to be done in the same system, which is where those big monolithic, so big service providers like traditional CRM tries to lock you in across all of those to try and be your one bullet for everything. Whereas if you could use Zendesk combined with like Xero for your accounting, and then maybe like Airtable for your sort of other CRM needs, you'd probably get most of the way to having a functional CRM, which would cost you maybe $100 a month. They're often in dollars rather than pounds. And then it just takes a bit of sort of linking those things up. And often software as a service will be driven on APIs. So they really focus on how their small part of the service can interlock into your wider economy rather than trying to be your entire ecosystem, which is what the traditional CRM would be. I maybe just used too many, too much weird lingo, but hopefully that was okay.
Thanks a lot. We have another question from Mandy up next. How can you ensure your manager's board realise that you do need an actual fundraising budget and that your post isn't cost neutral?
Sorry, your post isn't cost neutral.
And your post is your position.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry. Gotcha. I've never had the challenge of this, but I think it depends on the size of your organisation. But any point at which you see that your role adds value. So I think Product Lead actually has got quite a good example of this. We recently brought on a new team for individual giving. Previously, we didn't consider individual givers as a donor type because they were just people who responded to our night of television. And so what we're having to really do the education piece with our board about is, night of television is like sort of an activity, but it's actually just our largest acquisition channel for an individual giving team. So wherever possible, I think you do have to factor in the time spent on any project from individuals and see, is this actually paying? If you are only cost neutral, then I think something is wrong, because you're not going to be adding the value to the end, the bottom line. But ideally, you probably aren't. This is probably my worst answer. I apologise, Mandy.
So we can always circle back around to it as well. Have a think, and we can come back to it. If not, now we can chat about it later, and then put something in the Facebook group, Mandy, as well. So keep an eye out there. It's okay. Next up from Jonathan. Does your organisation have a donor ladder as part of your strategy to move donors from one-off givers to more regular givers, or is Comic Relief mainly focused on one-off giving? Follow-up question is, and how important is the donor data to moving people to donate more often and in different ways?
Yeah, great question. As I just alluded to, we've only recently brought on our individual giving team. So we're in the process of converting people, setting up those regular giving conversion journeys. Something which I was going to mention earlier, but I'd forgotten to, is that we actually never had a regular giving program at all. We had no means of setting up direct debit with Comic Relief until this January, when we launched with Go Cardless, who are a great supplier as well for setting up direct debits. And so we're in the process of setting up those journeys now, and data is absolutely at the heart of that. So a huge percentage of our donors do, it's about 75% of night of television donations come from people texting, and the data quality you get from text donations is pretty low. So we have a real push to try and then really push people into gift aid, which then has the marketing consents, which then allows us to take them on that journey. So data is absolutely at the heart of that sort of, but we're absolutely at the start of that journey. But we've got 30 years, well, not 30, we've got probably like 8 years of super quality data.
And 22.
And 22 of like burn the files, which is again just from system changes, and but yeah, from that 8 years of data, we're able to look at, we actually do have regular givers, but it's just that previously we only asked them to give once a year, and they came back and did it every year. And we used to have a lot of strategy around trying to push donors into being fundraisers, which now we've been able to do some quite in-depth analysis that the crossover between those two user groups is so low and the size of our donor group is so much larger than the size of our fundraiser groups that it really makes sense for us to be taking those donors on a regular giving journey rather than fundraising journey. So yes, data is super important.
Smashing. Another data question from Ruth. You mentioned data protection. Can you recommend any good resources for making sure you're compliant?
Yeah, great question. I think people sometimes overthink data protection. Like I think when GDPR came in, everybody had a really big panic. When I think the sort of the basics of it is almost common sense, but something which I'd suggest is just making sure that your teams have, like, I think the biggest risk for a data breach is a human being. So someone downloading a file onto their computer, losing that data, you've got a breach. So just trying to train people and making sure there's that awareness within your teams of their responsibility. In terms of making sure you're compliant, doing a data audit and understanding which systems your data is all sitting in and just mapping out where you know your data lives is a really good first step to make sure that you're not, that you get an understanding of those systems. Luckily, GDPR applies to every organisation, so hopefully if you're using Just Giving, you're using a leading CRM, they're all going to be up to the nines in their compliance. One area, I guess, would be just to look at your retention policies and make sure that you've got systems in place for stopping that, for making sure you get rid of stuff.
Great. Thank you very much, Caroline. Unfortunately, we are out of time for today's webinar. We will be continuing there. There's a bunch of questions still left over. I think there's 8 still unanswered. So we will be carrying these over to the Facebook group. That's at Charity Digital Events. Make sure you do come there and join us. Caroline will be answering questions for the next sort of half an hour or so. Big thank you for joining us. Really, really appreciate it. Thanks for coming down, and thank you all of you for joining us throughout the day. It's not the last activation. We do have another session left, which is a podcast recorded by yours truly and a few others here at Charity Digital, which talks about the fundraising ebook that everybody had a chance to download earlier in the day. So do tune into that, and I think it's starting in about half an hour or so. So tune in for that then. Also, don't forget to head over to our conference website, charitydigital.co.uk/BeMoreDigital2020, and register your interest there. Thank you all again, and hope to see you soon.
Right.